Hare Krishna, everyone. Firstly, I want to say welcome to another session of Prabhupada Memoirs, where we are talking to the direct disciples of Srila Prabhupada, so we can actually get an insight into his life and also the lives of his disciples. And today, I am so grateful and honored to be speaking to His Grace Dhananjaya Prabhu, who actually was his Srila Prabhupada's first Scottish male disciple, and has been there from quite close to the start of this, especially starting in the Europe side of things. And he is being responsible for registering the society in Holland. He's also helped has opened the Rome Temple that we have, and many more things in the UK that we'll be talking about as we go along. And he was an individual that at the age of 9, he had a premonition that on his 21st birthday, he will have a spiritual experience. And lo and behold, on 27th of July, 1969, that came true. So I'm not going to say more than that. And I tell you, after this, you are not going to think that this is any coincidence. This is absolutely, it gave me, when I was speaking about this and hearing it from him before, I was like, wow. So welcome, Dhananjaya Prabhu. How are you?
Very happy to be with you.
Same here. It's so nice to have you. And I wanted to start, if I may, is that where are you right now? Are you in the UK, I gather?
I'm in Luton.
Not far. You're the closest person I have interviewed the disciples. So it's really nice to have you. We're on the same turf of UK. I wanted to start with, I gave a little intro about the 27th July 1969. You as an individual have, had this inclination to spiritual life from such a young age. So can you tell us what happened on that day, 27th July 1969, for you?
Okay. I hope you don't mind me going into detail because I can't help myself.
I don't think the viewers will mind at all.
Anyway, I was 1957 in Scotland in this new town called East Kilbride, not far from Glasgow. And I went to what's known as Heatherina Primary School. And I had a really close friend from that particular year called Robert Napier. And so we were walking home together, and he brought up this Polish boy's name. He said, "Did you notice that when he took his shoes and socks off to the gym, he's got 6 toes in one of his feet? Isn't that weird?" And I said, "Well, that's the way that, God has made him. He's made him like that. We should just accept him." So when I said that, Robert says to me immediately, "Oh, when you grow up, you'll end up being a minister or something." And at that very moment, this disembodied voice that only I could hear, because I noticed that Robert wasn't paying attention particularly, and the disembodied voice said in a very clear way that I could understand, in a very simple way, that you would have a tremendous religious experience in your 21st birthday. And I was shocked at this, but I didn't divulge what had just happened to my friend, to me, because I was thinking he will think I'm nuts, hearing a voice from the sky or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I went home to my parents' house, and I didn't talk about it to them either, because I don't think they would have understood. Although I was brought up as a Christian, and later on in my teenage years, I became a minister in my local church, the West Kirk of Scotland, Protestant. And I had a Sunday school group. I was about maybe 14, 15 at the time. And so I was always, teaching from the Bible, straight from the New Testament. But there was one question that really, came up all the time in my life at that time. And that is, why is it that in the Bible it says that animals don't have a soul? Or does it say anywhere in the Bible? Because, you know, a lot of people were saying that at that time, that only human beings have a soul, but other living entities don't. And I asked, I said, well, where is this soul? Why is it just human beings? I even asked the minister of the church, and he didn't give a very good explanation at all. So that kind of worried me a little bit that, you know, maybe I should not be teaching these boys if there's no faith in the process. And so I went through that part of my life, remembering that experience or forgetting that experience. As I grew older, I got the opportunity to leave East Kilbride in Scotland and come down to London and take up a job in HM Customs and Excise, as it was called at that time.
You were a civil servant, right?
I was an executive officer, an EO, at the age of 18.
Wow.
And I had a whole office full of elderly gentlemen that were under me. I was supposed to be giving them instructions all the time. And it was a very, you know, it's a nice building called Adelaide House, right on London Bridge, and very close to Billingsgate. Fish market used to be there, and the monument where the Great Fire of London started in 1666, and custom houses there. And so it was a very historical area, very prestigious place. And I was into music like anything. So I had a friend at that time, now I'm talking about when I'm about 18, 19, this Irish guy. He was known as Irish Dave, and I was Scottish Dave. And we used to go down to Portobello Road quite regularly. There was this amazing record shop that sold records of the underground music community, like Iron Butterfly and so many groups that most people have never heard of. Anyway, so we went there and listened to a few records, didn't have to pay for them. And we're walking down Portobello Road to get the tube back to where I was living. I was living in Crouch End, which is not far from Muswell Hill and Alexandra Palace. And so there was a Harinam party going on at that time on Portobello Road. And we were standing there watching them and thinking, who are these people? I had seen them a few times before, but I pretended I'd just seen them for the first time. And one of them came across this Scottish girl called Vishaka. She was the first Scottish female.
Here we go.
From Dundee.
So
I'm from Edinburgh myself. And
no rivalry, I gather. No rivalry.
No rivalry.
Dundee. Yeah. Dundee, Edinburgh.
And she was selling the Back to Godhead magazine. And she handed one to Irish Dave, and he started looking through it. And she said, well, why don't you take one too? And I said, well, I'm okay. My friend's got one. I can borrow his to read. So I had a few moments in my life where the devotees were very close to me, but I wasn't very close to them. I just kept running away from them all the time. I wasn't a very good candidate for Krishna consciousness. But one day when I was walking down in Leicester Square, I saw this leaflet on the floor, on the ground, and I picked it up. And it was a little piece of paper, not very big. And the letters were, we're going to hold this special procession starting at Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, on the 27th of July at 2 o'clock. Please come, and when you do come, please bring something, like maybe a piece of fruit or some incense. That would be very nice. We very much appreciate that. And I thought, that's pretty far out. I'd like to go to that. And also, it jogged my memory of what happened when I was 9 years old. I would have this tremendous religious experience. And that's what kind of motivated me, because I was looking, I was actually looking. Not full time, but I went to Hyde Park Corner and saw this float. It looked like a float. Of course, it was Lord Jagannath's Rath cart, the very first Rath Yatra held in Europe, I think, on the 27th of July, 1969.
That's the first one in London, Hyde Park Corner.
Yes.
Where you started to. Yeah.
And I was interested to see what they were doing there. And so I walked a little bit closer to the float. And this American devotee, who I got to know as Trivikram, he saw me take an interest, and he motioned to me saying, please come here, come here. And I said, are you sure you want me? He said, yeah. He said, you're quite robust. We're trying to get this float started. So will you help push it from the back? So I agreed. But the float didn't go very far because the wheels were started falling apart. Then they made an announcement over the megaphone that we were going to continue the procession down to Trafalgar Square without the float. And that's the first time I chanted Hare Krishna sincerely with the devotees at that time.
I just want to say that it sounds so amazing. On your 21st birthday, the first thing you did was you went to a Rath Yatra. First ever Rath Yatra we had in UK. You actually helped push the Rath cart, even though you might have not gone far. It was the first Rath Yatra, and then you chanted Hare Krishna for the first time. It just sounds, and that premonition that you had, it came true.
Came true, yeah.
Wow. How can I just on that then? Because then, of course, the Rath Yatra happened. You got to Trafalgar Square. What did you do after that? So, because I know you're working in your job as well. So, what was the situation after that finished?
On a Sunday, so I wasn't working that particular day.
No, oh yeah.
And what intrigued me was I saw these two ladies with drums, which of course they're the mridungas, and they were leading a kirtan on the plinth for Nelson's column. And I was really impressed by the music. So they sang the Hare Krishna mantra, maybe for 10 or 15 minutes. Then another American came and took the microphone and said, please don't leave yet. We haven't finished the program. We're going to be handing out prasadam, which is special spiritual food. And so I stayed for that. And the spiritual food happened to be a slice of orange and some peanuts, which didn't seem to be that spiritual to me. But anyway, they were making an endeavor. And then another American took the microphone and said, Hare Krishna, everybody. I'd just like to inform you that we just acquired a new temple, and we're looking for volunteers to help paint and decorate the temple. So if you'd like to come forward, anybody here at this moment, then we can discuss the next move. So I that's what I did. I was just so enthralled by what was going on, because also I liked what that American had said. Besides giving out the prasadam, he was speaking a little bit about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, very simple terms. Anyway, so I approached Mukunda, his name is Mukunda, and maybe he was a little bit sort of surprised that someone, because I had long hair and a beard at that time. And he said, well, I asked him, I said, where is this place? Where's this new temple going to be? And he said, we're not giving out that information to anybody. And I thought, that's a bit funny. Advertising that. He said, well, don't contact us, we'll contact you. So please give me your address. So I handed over my address. I was staying, like I've mentioned, in Crouch End area, Finsbury Park. And so that was it. And then I left. But I was very elated, you can say. I was feeling, this is a very, very special group. I've never seen anybody dressed like that before. And I didn't think too much. I thought, well, they've taken my address, and if it happens, it's meant to happen. And it did. A couple of days later, this English devotee called Kulashekar came to visit me, and he invited me to come with him down to the temple. And I said, yes, of course, I'd like to see what you're doing there. So we took the tube, went down to Tottenham Court Road, walked to the very place. And he, oh yeah, I remember also, besides the fruit and the flower, if you can bring, you know, some grains or something. And so I thought, well, maybe I can bring something too, out of respect. So I didn't know about the rules and regulations at that time. So I boiled up some eggs. I got half a dozen boiled eggs and put them in a brown paper bag and brought them with me. And Kulashekar took me down to the basement, and that's where the kitchen was at that time. And he introduced me to Yamuna, who was the cook. And her sister was also there, Janaki, and they were cooking the lunch. And at that moment, I thought, well, I'll give this little surprise package. So I handed over the brown paper bag to Yamuna, and I said, "Oh, you can use that in the you know, for lunch." And she smiled to begin with, and then but when she looked inside the bag and saw there were hard-boiled eggs, she said, "Well, actually, we don't eat eggs."
Yes, that sounds mad. It's nice, the gesture. I was just wondering, Prabhu, I'm getting some comments. Is it possible you could bring your device closer to you? So I think the mic, they're just hearing, some people finding it difficult to hear.
Oh, it's not
just yeah, that's, if possible, just a bit closer. If you could just try, and we'll see how that is. That better, everyone? Sounds a bit better to me. So please, yes. So you brought eggs.
And she said, "Well, thank you for the thought, but I hope you don't mind that I'm going to put them in the rubbish bin. But please stay for lunch. We're going to be having lunch together." And I thought, yeah, I'd like to do that. And so the dining room, the prasadam room, was just across from the kitchen, the other side of the showroom, in the basement of the very place. And so then they told me to sit cross-legged on a mat, and then they came and served this amazing feast. It was just wonderful prasadam. I thought, wow, if this is how they eat every day, I want to be a member of this society. Because I loved eating. It was just, it was celestial prasadam.
Fantastic.
It made a big impression on me. Then Kulashekar said, "Let's go upstairs. I want you to hear some recordings that we have." So he played the single, which is on the Apple label of the Hare Krishna mantra, sung by the Radha Krishna temple. And of course, I knew that the Apple label was owned by the Beatles. And I thought, wow, they've got this amazing connection with some really famous group. And I loved the way it was produced by George Harrison. Then I said, "Would you like to hear our spiritual master's voice?" I said, "Yeah." And they had this album called on the Happening label from New York, Prabhupada chanting. And then after he chanted and led kirtan, he spoke. So when I heard his voice for the first time, I knew that I had met him in a previous life. There's no question in my mind. And that even reinforced my desire to get closer to these people, and that's what I did. I just hung out with them. I wasn't in a hurry to get back to Finsbury Park and be with my Scottish friends. I wanted to be with these wonderful devotees.
That's amazing. So here we talked about, you hear the sound of, you heard Srila Prabhupada, and that really made you think that I want to be closer to these people. So then you actually got the opportunity to meet Srila Prabhupada, I believe on 11th of September, 1969.
Yes, that was when Prabhupada flew from Hamburg to London Heathrow Airport. And so there was maybe 10 or 15 of us at the airport.
Wow.
And in those days, the way you got out of the plane was to put some steps up against the plane, the outside of the plane. And then all the, you know, everybody would come out that way and then walk across the tarmac. So when he got to the top of this, you know, he waved, he saw that, you know, we were having a kirtan as well. And he was smiling like anything. And he came over to us. And the amazing thing he did was he gently rubbed everybody on the back. Everybody was paying their obeisances, and he went around all of us and
Just like,
all of us, you know, it was very touching. It's very, very transcendental. And so then after he did that, the American devotees, they said, we'd like you to have a kirtan. We've rented some space in the VIP lounge so we can go inside this particular building and we can have kirtan for as long as we want. So that's what happened. And there were some members of the press there and some photographers. And of course, one journalist asked Prabhupada, so Swami, why have you come here? And he said, I have come to teach for 1 year for God, love of God. He spoke very, very simply. And that interview was printed, the whole interview was printed in the paper.
Oh, wow.
And there was a very nice photograph of Prabhupada chanting and playing his kartals. So he was very happy with that.
Wow.
And for that, we were staying at the property of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Tittenhurst Park.
So how did that happen? That you were staying with John Lennon? Does that?
Well, because originally we were staying in Bury Place.
Yes, that's what.
Shymasundar, he wanted to expand the temple room, and there was a wall. There was a load-bearing wall, but he wanted to remove that load-bearing wall and put in an RSJ, reinforced steel joint. And that's kind of dangerous work.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a 5-story building. And like I said, it was a load-bearing wall. So he thought that perhaps we should move out while he was doing this work, which was a little dangerous, you can see, but they did have permission from the council. And so Shymasundar was concerned about where we could stay. He said, can we stay with you? He was asking George when he visited. And he said, no, because the bungalow is too small. And it was about that time that the single was released, and he came to the official, what do you call it, when you have a song?
Top of the Pops.
It wasn't Top of the Pops, yeah. No, we didn't.
Okay. Okay.
But it was a special release.
Okay. Yeah, a debut or something they call it, is it?
Yeah.
Like when it comes out, yeah.
And he stayed with us for several hours. And he said, but, you know, John has just got himself a nice property called Tittenhurst Park. He used to belong to the Cadbury family. And he said, there's a row of cottages I've seen, so maybe he wouldn't mind you staying there. So that's how we ended up going to Tittenhurst Park.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And because this is a time that you got Srila Prabhupada with you at this time at John Lennon's place, correct? Is that right? And because so when Srila Prabhupada, you've got to the house, was he a bit surprised? It's like, I thought we were going to Bury Place. What's happening? How did he?
Well,
how was that?
Like I said, you know, John Lennon was really into chanting Hare Krishna. So he had agreed that Prabhupada could come in John Lennon's white Rolls Royce car.
Okay.
So there was a
wow.
Car. And after we finished the kirtan in the VIP lounge, he was taken to the car. And I think that's the first time that Prabhupada ever rode in a Rolls Royce even.
Wow.
And we were all in ecstasy just being with him. And but one of the American devotees was supposed to go into the Rolls Royce because the driver didn't know what was going to happen. He was just told to drop Prabhupada off at the gate. But in the excitement and the ecstasy of being with Prabhupada. Nobody went with Prabhupada. He just went by himself in the car and the luggage. And we came behind in this old Land Rover with a canvas roof. And so, obviously the Land Rover took more time to reach them. That's part of the Rolls Royce. So when we got there, Prabhupada just standing at the front gate. And we all piled out. And he said, "So, where do you want me to go?" He wasn't upset. He didn't make any comment or anything. He must have been standing there for at least 5 or 10 minutes by himself.
Wow.
And we had prepared his rooms in the central. There's a row of 3 cottages, gardens cottages. And so the brahmachari stayed on the right side of the middle cottage. Prabhupada stayed in the middle cottage, and the householder stayed in the cottage to the left. And like I mentioned, John Lennon was really into us being there. He really liked the fact that we were around.
Wow.
In fact, he went so far as to want to donate land. So with this Tivnur's Park, there was 76 acres of land, arable land. And he wanted to give us 6 acres. And that was quite surprising. When Prabhupada heard this, he was very, very happy that he was making this offer of land. And he said, so we should grow grow vegetables and grains, and whatever any excess is there, we should take it into what do you call the Covent Garden Market.
Yes.
We're about 25 miles outside of London. And so I said, how should we get this material to central London? He said, by bullock cart. Bullock cart. And I said,
at that time,
that doesn't sound very practical because
25 miles.
we have so many lorries and the lorries drive really fast. And he said, no. He said, the animals, they should leave the night before, and they will walk all through the night and reach the market even before the lorries.
Oh. Wow. She's a Prabhupada, and because we were speaking to Lokanath.
Vision.
Yeah, he's got, because we're speaking to Lokanath Maharaj, and he was talking about Padayatra, and they had these buses, and he said, no, you use bullet carts. And so Srila Prabhupada had this, you could see. It's really nice to hear this angle of bullet carts from you as well. So you also had the mercy there with the bullet carts. So can I take, so from the 11th you came, you took him to the place, and on the 12th of September, 11th that night, he gave a class, if I'm correct.
It was in the afternoon.
That afternoon he gave a class.
Yeah, what he did was his normal procedure when he went to a new temple was there would be kirtan, then a lecture, then questions. So I had made the dais for him to sit on with a cushion and a place to put the books, a book stand in the temple room, which was the orangery. And so what was I going to say?
The class. So it's
yeah. I was hoping he would lead the kirtan again, but this time he instructed Jamuna to lead the kirtan, and she was sitting down on the floor playing harmonium. Then he motioned that we should dance in a circle
around
Jamuna,
yeah,
a clockwise circle, and we did that for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it was a very ecstatic experience. And so then Prabhupada stopped the kirtan with his kartals. Then he spoke for almost an hour. And then after speaking for an hour, he asked, any questions? So I put my hand up. Nobody else did. And he looked and he said, yes. And I said, when can I take initiation?
As you do.
Yes, you do. And he looked at me and he said, that we will see. That we will see. Because obviously he wanted to check me out to make sure it wasn't just a dud, because the disciple has to be as qualified as the guru.
Mm.
Anyway, like everything to do with Prabhupada, things that get, you can say, things happen very, very quickly and very transcendentally. Because I also wanted to get to know him more. And I happened to be sharing a room with Trivikram, the American
Yes.
devotee. He engaged me
Massaging.
yeah. And he was lying in his sleeping bag. And it was time for him to get up and give Prabhupada a massage. But I noticed he wasn't moving. And I said, Trivikram Prabhu, are you okay? Are you still going to get up and massage Prabhupada? He said, no, I can't. I've got this terrible toothache. You'll have to go in my place. And I said to him, I've never massaged anyone in my life. Of course, I wasn't initiated. I got asked that question the day before about initiation. And he said, well, it's easy. You start with the head, you put some sandalwood oil in your hands, rub them, and you start massaging his head. And then the rest of the body, you use mustard oil. And he'll keep saying harder, 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 because, he was told by the Kaviraj in India that the way to help maintain his health, he should have quite a vigorous massage to help the blood circulate. Because, Prabhupada sat for hours and hours and hours. The only time he would move was for the morning walk. But the rest of the time, you wouldn't see him move anywhere, except for some programs. So, and he said, Trivikram said to me, he said, you'll know that you're doing a good job of massaging him if he starts to fall asleep. So what you have to do is to try to get him to fall asleep.
Okay.
Anyway, armed with that knowledge, I went in and so it was quite cold and there was an electric bar heater in the room. And so Prabhupada came in and he started undressing and he asked me, he said, so where are you from? I said, I'm from Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. And then he asked me, how far is Edinburgh from London? I said, about 400 miles. Then he asked, how long does it take for the train to go from London to Edinburgh? I said, about maybe 8 hours. Then he asked another series of questions. He said, did you learn British history at school? No, he said, where were you educated? I said, in Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. Then he asked, did you learn any British history? I said, yes, I did. He said, so when was the Battle of Trafalgar? I said, 1805. Then he asked, when was the Battle of Waterloo? And I said, 1815. He said, yes, I also learned those things at school. And I think the reason why he took an interest in me, besides being the first Scottish student, was because when he was a student, an Indian student in Calcutta, all his teachers were Scottish.
Yeah, Scottish churches, yeah.
And but in this situation, I was the Scottish student and he was the Indian teacher.
The other way around. It's so, look how it works out. Wow.
And I asked Trivikram, I said, how long does the massage normally take? He said about 2 to 2.5 hours.
Wow, that's a good massage.
Yeah, a long massage. And so then he saw the electric bar heater and he said, switch that on. So I put 1 bar, there's actually 3 bars, but being Scottish, I only put 1 on. I said, no, I said all 3. He says, I do not like the cold. I like the room to be warm. Because then he goes and just takes all of his clothes off and he has his gumshoe on and he sits in a simple mat, a straw mat. And so I saw the bottles, I saw the sandalwood oil bottle and the mustard bottles, and so I started with the head and was massaging him like this on the head. And of course he said harder, so I did it harder. But then because the room was getting warm, and I have a tendency to sweat, I started sweating. And I thought, we are not allowed the sweat to touch my spiritual master's body. So I was kind of like keeping away from him if it started dripping.
Yeah, because you're sweating and you don't want it to.
Sweated because the room was really heating up. And so then he would tell me to stop and then do his back and his arms and his belly. And then he, you know, for his arms, because I was sitting cross-legged next to him, he grabbed my knee and he showed how to do long strokes, not little ones, but long strokes.
Mm.
And I kept thinking, why is this happening? How come I've got this amazing opportunity to be alone with such a pure devotee of the Lord? And I was just, but he kept saying harder and harder, and eventually did fall asleep for about 5 minutes. Then he took his legs, you know, he took one leg and showed me how to massage his leg from the ankle up to the thigh. And then after did that, with the mustard oil, of course, to pull his toes, which he called fingers. And then I was massaging his feet. His lotus feet were just so, it was just an amazing experience. And then the way that he showed that he was finished with the massage was he'd give me a little kick with his foot.
Oh.
And he would stand up, and then he would make like a little bowl from his left hand and tell me to put in some mustard oil. And to finish the massage, he would take some drops of mustard oil and breathe them in through his nostrils. Then he would put some oil in his ears, and then finally in his navel, his belly button.
Wow.
And so, you know, I was really in ecstasy. You can imagine being with Prabhupada and the fact that I was able to please him by getting him to fall asleep for a few minutes because he was fully relaxed. I was also happy that I was able to answer his questions properly and not make a fool of myself. Because I was imagining he would start quoting the Bhagavad Gita. You know,
Yeah.
something very complicated. There's nothing like that at all.
General knowledge. Checking that you are Scottish, that you are who you say you are.
Yeah, that's the way he found out. So I go downstairs and I was ready to go back to the room. But Jamuna was there. And Jamuna says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I was going to go to my room." She said, "No, wait here." Prabhupada, what he does is, first of all, he has his massage, then he takes a shower, he chants his Gayatri, and he eats his lunch. And whoever massages him gets to eat all the remnants from his lunch. So just wait here patiently. And when his plate comes down, you don't have to share these Mahaprasad with anybody. Just, you know, you can eat to your heart's content. And that was like the cherry on the
That's
top,
right. So,
you know.
so much bliss.
Oh, it was just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Wow. Prabhu, like the one thing that's you can see how merciful Srila Prabhupada was. We're so lucky that you had this such connection with him as well from like the very start of your spiritual journey, which is just absolutely amazing. I just wanted to bring on because there's so many parts, and we're gonna have you on again. This is not going to be the last one because everybody that's listening, there's so many pastimes we have. But I want to take it to 1972. There was a time because usually mothers and fathers with the Hare Krishna movement, they weren't so favorable because everybody seemed to feel like their sons would come or daughters would come and then they suddenly join the ashram and they're like, oh my God. But your mother came to see Srila Prabhupada, if I'm correct.
Came to see me initially.
Came to see you, yes,
This
yes.
when Prabhupada went to Scotland, to Edinburgh. And he insisted I also go. And my mother, she came across from East Kilbride, that new town near Glasgow, with my father. My father drove and he stayed in the car. He didn't come up to the temple. He was a little bit sort of, you know, very Scottish. and his attitude, very old-fashioned. And he wasn't quite sure what all the clothing was and, all the rituals and so on.
Yes.
So my mother quite boldly entered the building. It was called the Oddfellows Hall on Forest Road in Edinburgh. And the temple was on the first floor. And Tribhuvannath was the one who organized that particular place that he rented for £15 a week. It was in a wonderful central area of Edinburgh. And so she was asking people, oh, I've come to see my son, he's with the Hare Krishnas. So she got some general directions. Oh, they're upstairs. You can't help see them. They're just up there. Downstairs, there was like a market area. And so she went up the stairs, and this Scottish brahmacharini saw my mom. She's in her 60s at that time. And she said, oh, can I help you? And she said, yes, I'm the mother of David. You might know him as Dhananjaya. Come to see him. And she said, well, just wait here and I'll find out where he is. And at that time, I was taking a shower on the top of the building. And so she came down, she said, oh, he's not quite ready to see you. Would you like to visit and speak to our spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada? He's here with us right now. And she said, well, if I'm not, interrupting anything he's doing. She said, no. He likes to have visitors come. She said, okay. And so Miss Brahmacharini took my mother to Prabhupada's room. And she paid her basically. Prabhupada was sitting on a cushion behind this old kitchen table with the legs sawn off. And so Prabhupada said yes. And then this lady said, oh, Dhananjaya's mother is here, but she would like to see you too. And he immediately got up from his cushion, walked across the floor of the room, and shook my mother by the hand. And he said, thank you so much for allowing your son to be a member of our society. We'll look after him. He's in safe hands. And she remembered that meeting. It was always a very short meeting, just really proper for the rest of her life.
Oh, such a gentleman, Srila Prabhupada. The way he interacted, you can see.
He's a perfect gentleman.
Perfect gentleman. Thank you. And it's so nice that your mother got to meet Srila Prabhupada as well. And I wanted to, one thing that was also good, you yourself, Prabhu, you were also that type of perfect gentleman. You also had this way of making friends and getting close to people. And of course, as people know, one of those friends, of course, are the actual Beatles. There's pictures of you doing kirtan with them. Like there's one here. Where was this, if you don't mind?
This was in Surrey. It was the back garden of this big house that Apple had rented because they wanted to do like a release of the single. And we didn't expect George himself to come, but he was so into being with us that he showed up. And you can see next to George is Mukunda.
The one holding the record, is it?
He's holding up the sleeve, yeah.
The sleeve, yeah.
The record sleeve. With
and you're next to him. And you're next to him.
Yeah. And I mean, our single was in the charts. We got to number 9 on Top of the Pops. And
Wow.
I went along to the studios, of course, with the other devotees, with Shymasundar and Gurudas and Mukunda and Janaki and Jamuna. And that was at White City Studios, BBC Studios in Wembley.
Wow.
And so Prabhupada wanted to hear, he wanted to see how we did this program. So I arranged a room and a TV in the main house, Tin House, so that we could take Prabhupada there and he could watch the footage, because it was still in the top 10. It was in the top 10 for 6 weeks. So that Top of the Pops program is a half-hour program from 7
yes.
till 7 in the evening. and it's watched by about 15 million people every Thursday, once a week. And so we were sitting there with Prabhupada, and I had no idea when they were going to play that particular song. But what they did that evening was they played it last before, and they played all these other songs before. But Prabhupada tolerated. He just sat there, and then when he saw us, he was very impressed. He said, "Just see, now Hare Krishna has become a household word, a household name."
Amazing.
So
And
this is the potency of this cameras. He liked it. He liked to go in front of cameras and talk about Krishna. And the more people that were there to listen to him, the happier he was. And then Mukunda got an invitation by the Dutch equivalent of Top of the Pops called Top Pop.
Top Pop.
Over to Holland, to Haarlem. Haarlem is the place where the Dutch television studios are. And so that we'll pay for your flight, we'll pay for your accommodation if you need accommodation, and we'll bring a vehicle to take you to the studios and back to the airport and so on. And of course, to do all that, it took a lot of arrangement, and it took time. We left about 5:30 in the morning. We didn't get back till about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. So the whole day was spent doing like a couple of minutes of kirtan, but it was worth it. And Mukunda actually asked the organizers of Top Pop, "Our spiritual master is here with us right now. Could he come with us and say some words?" And the guy said, "Well, we're more a music show. We don't usually have people speak, but because of your unique character, we'll let him speak." And
wow.
How long can you give us? And the guy looked at his watch and said, "Well, maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes to speak."
Amazing.
So Mukunda went to Prabhupada with this information that we were being invited to Holland. They got the chance of flying over there. They're going to pay all expenses and so on. And Mukunda said, "Would you like to come with us?" He said, "Yes." And Mukunda said, "Well, I'm sorry, but you can only speak for 2 minutes. We're really limited." And Prabhupada said, 2 minutes? I can explain the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness in 2 minutes. I'm coming.
Jai. Look at that.
And so what they did was, in one part of the studio, they had this spray paint outline of an Indian temple. They put a table with a cushion on it, and we were sitting on the floor. We mimed everything, by the way, at that time. And they had these dry ice machines to make smoke. So Prabhupada had a chair to stand on to get onto top of the table. So when they started pumping in all this dry ice, it looked like that Prabhupada was floating on a cloud. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, because it's all the it looks like it's just the cloudy on the floor because of the dry ice.
Actually,
gives that smoke screen style.
Over enthusiastic, these guys with the machines, because he had 2 of them, and we kind of disappeared under the smoke, and it looked like Prabhupada was sitting on a flying carpet.
Wow.
In the clouds. But he liked it. He liked it very much.
That was meant to be, because it does give that type of majestic atmosphere when you see it. So and I just want to just also bring on to the point, because I got that picture when I was looking at our lovely book, Chant and Be Happy. And then it got me thinking, I was looking, hang on, that looks like Prabhu, that looks like Dhananjaya Prabhu. Then I saw this picture, which I'd love to get your thoughts on. Please, if everyone can see it. So on this, I was reading the book, and it says George Harrison and Patty Boyd with Srila Prabhupada and a disciple at George Home in England, 1969. And I was like, that looks like you.
1972.
Okay, they must have. Okay, 1972.
Yes.
Well, it's good that so we've got to get back to these guys. But yeah, so just this, please tell us. I was like, wow, okay. So you got this amazing picture with Srila Prabhupada, George Harrison, his other half, and yourself. But I was very intrigued because it hasn't got your name on there, and I was like, please tell us the reason of this photo and how it came about.
Well, really, because Prabhupada had put me in a position to represent him and ask Mr. George Harrison, our good friend, to help find a bigger property, because we just overgrown Berry Place. That Berry Place is meant for maybe maximum 15 residents, but we had up to 65 devotees there, and we were so popular. And Prabhupada said that. He said, perhaps if we approach him, he'll be happy to help us. And so what I used to do is walk from Berry Place Temple to the Apple Studios and the Apple Building in Savile Row, and I brought prasadam because I knew that George loved prasadam. He loved samosas, he loved pakoras, he loved all kinds of different sabjis. And so I'd always, go to the reception in Savile Row in the Apple Building and say, "Oh, I've come to see George Harrison." And the receptionist said, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "I don't think I need an appointment. You just give him my name." Wow. And so she would call downstairs because the recording studio was in the basement. And at that time, he was working on an album called Living in a Material World.
As you do.
That. It was a very
I like that title.
Living in a Material World. And so he would always welcome me, and he loved the prasadam, and he kept insisting that if there was any friends of his, that they should get copies of Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. He loved preaching, just like any devotee likes to preach.
Yeah.
So he was a natural devotee like that. And so one day I said to him, you're so much into talking about Srila Prabhupada and Kirtan. Why don't you take a Krishna name from Prabhupada? And he said, already you do have a Krishna name, Hari Son of Hari. And then one time he asked me, he said, "So how's everything over there in Berry Place?" Because when George was in town, he'd like to come over and have darshan with Radha Langaneshwara. One time he came over with Peter Sellers. You've heard of Peter Sellers, right?
I myself haven't, but I'm sure the audience will have heard of him.
He's an actor and a comedian, Peter Sellers. Anyway, so oh yeah, he said, "By the way, how's everything going in Berry Place?" And I said, "Well, I think we've become too popular." And he said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, we have all these nice boys and girls that want to come and stay with us. And, we just don't have the space any longer. And oh, by the way, would you like to help us find a bigger property?"
Oh, so you approached him like that? Wow.
I popped the question, just like that, just like I said.
Just like that.
And he said, "I would be honored to help you.
Oh,
I would be honored to help you." And so me, because I was brought up in a council estate, my parents never had their own home. It's always, council house. I said, "Well, what should I do?" And he said, "Well, there's a square just next to Savile Row, and you'll find lots and lots of estate agents there. So you go to them and you find what's on their books, then you check the details, and if you think it's worth visiting, then you go along with the surveyor and the representative from the estate. And if you think it's really worthwhile, then you call me and I'll come with you."
Oh, wow. So, which building was this that you were your?
Well, we looked at 8 different buildings. That's the point. In the summer and the autumn of '72, we looked at. There was one a convent run by Polish nuns with 22 acres of beautiful gardens, landscape gardens in a beautiful big building. And it was for £125,000. So when I went along, I was dressed as you see me, with a shaved head.
Shaved head in this picture.
Any carny clothes. Yeah. And just like that. But in a yellow color. It's darker on it. It's strip dry material. So they didn't know who I was. I'm asking, please let me see this property. Let me go around and check everything out. And so at this convent, because it looked like a nice property that we looked after very well, maintained very well, I called him and I said, would you like to come and see this property? And it wasn't too far away. He said, yeah. I said, I'll come round and pick you up. So he came round in his Porsche. And then we set up for the place. And whenever his car would stop at traffic lights, he had a bead bag in his right hand the whole time. So he would go like this to anybody who saw him and recognized him at the pedestrian.
Oh, it's like preaching, chant.
Hare Krishna and be happy.
Oh.
And one of the other properties we looked at was called Runnymede Farm. And that's near the place where King John, he signed the Magna Carta. Have you heard
Oh,
of
yes. Yes. And
so
yes,
it's a
Magna Carta.
historical place right on the Thames. And so because this farm was right close to the actual spot where in 1215 they put together this Magna Carta with King John in 1215. So it was called Runnymede Park. And so we went there. George came, and I came with an elderly devotee called Bhakti Pramod. He was about 60, and he worked for the Midland Bank. So there was George, there was myself, there was I think Shymasundar was also there. And there's footage of this meeting. And I had the keys to the main building. And I was really enthusiastic to show Prabhupada, and Prabhupada came, of course. And actually I drove with Prabhupada in the same car.
Oh.
Bhakti Pramod, he was the driver. He used to call Prabhupada Your Grace all the time. Very educated and very much dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. So I had the keys to the main building, and we were walking up the hill to work. And of course, the place was overgrown. It hadn't been used for years. So George said, they shouldn't call this Runnymede Park. They should call it Runny Down Park. Anyway, so Prabhupada stopped just a few feet away from the building. And I thought, well, this is a good time to get the keys out and open the door and let Prabhupada in. But Prabhupada just stood there and he said, so here in this spot, we should build a bank. And the bank should be managed by Bhakti Pramod, who's, he worked for the Midland Bank. Then he pointed his walking stick, his walking cane to George, and he said, and you, George, you should deposit all your money in that bank, and we'll spend it all in Krishna's service. Can you imagine how bold Prabhupada was?
Prabhupada.
Not an easy thing that George was agreeing to help us find a property. But what happened was, which he really didn't like, was that when he would come with me to these buildings, very surprisingly, the price would shoot up. If it was advertised 120.
Because George, yeah.
It would be gazumped to 130 or whatever. Because the estate agents are greedy people. They want to try to squeeze as much money out as possible. And he hated that. But it was like Krishna's mercy that when we finally got to the manor, because that was about the 8th property.
So the Bhaktivedanta Manor, the 8th property.
George wasn't in the country. He had gone to Los Angeles, or just about to go to Los Angeles. And I phoned him up from what's now the temple room. There was a payphone there, the old-fashioned ones that take two.
Yeah.
And I called him up and I said, George, I found this estate. It's called Piggott's Manor. It's about 17 miles from London. And it's going for £220,000. And when would you like to come out and visit? And he said, well, I can't do it right now because I'm off to LA. We're going to have a meeting with Ringo, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney, and our financial advisor, Alan Klein. And we're going to discuss the future of Apple. And it'll be gone for about 6 months. They said, don't worry. I completely trust your judgment on this one. And we'll buy it on one condition, that you don't pay a penny more than the asking price. It was like a big thing for him. Don't pay anything more than the asking price.
Mm-hmm.
So it just so happened that the estate agents who were in charge of the manor were in Bayswater Road, near to the Kensington Gardens. And so I went there, as I mentioned, with just devotee clothing. I didn't have any other type of clothing. Met the guy in charge, and I asked, can we visit? Can we go inside and see the property? Because the only people that were living there was this Scottish lady called Mrs. Ruffles, and she was from Aberdeen, and she was Jewish. So in Scotland, I don't know if you know this, but Scots generally are quite mean. But the meanest of all the Scots are the Aberdonians, those from Aberdeen.
No, I didn't.
And on top of that, she was Jewish. And she lived there with her son and a gardener. And anyway, so he said, I'll come back in 6 months. George said this, I'll come back in 6 months. But in the meantime, here's the name and phone number of my solicitor, and tell him to go ahead and buy this property. And This is sight unseen. I mean, George didn't see it until he actually finally came back from America. He said, it's going to take that amount of time anyway. Everything takes time when it comes to expensive transactions.
Yeah.
And what he did was, because the album he made called Living the Material World was so successful that all the proceeds from the sale of that record were put in a foundation called the Material World Charitable Foundation. So it was the foundation that bought the property in 1973. And we were staying there on what's known as a peppercorn rent. I don't know if you've heard of that saying.
No.
In the 1600s in this country, peppercorns were more valuable than gold because they came from the Spice Islands, in Asia. So a peppercorn rent was, if you don't have money and you've got some peppercorns, 6 peppercorns is a bona fide amount to pay.
Okay.
Anyway, that translated into £10 a year.
That's it. £10 a year.
Yeah.
And you were paying like £15 at Berry Place a week when you had it.
No, Oddfellows.
Oh, okay.
Edinburgh, not Berry Place. Berry Place is £500 a month, a quarter.
Okay. Okay.
Quarter. But Tribhuvannath got this special deal of £15 for Oddfellows House in Edinburgh. Anyway, so that's a whole other story. But
wow. So if so, on this peppercorn rent, this picture, I would love to know the significance of, because then George must have come back. Srila Prabhupada's in this picture. How did this picture come about?
We were on a program with Prabhupada in Reading, and George had actually invited us to come and visit him at his home.
Okay.
And this is taken in the grounds of Friar Park.
Oh, lovely. So,
and the interesting thing is, I suppose,
that
originally I was supposed to take the the picture. And Shymasundar was going to stand next to George Harrison. And Prabhupada noticed it. And then he said, no, he said, you take the photo and he'll stand next to George.
Wow.
That's how I ended up standing next to
That's
George.
how you came onto this photo. Oh, fantastic. Thank you for the
That's in
history.
1972.
72 you took this picture. It's been so lovely. Yeah.
It was Shyamsundar who took the picture.
No, Shyamsundar that took the picture.
Yeah.
And you're in the picture right now. Thank you for sharing, because these are the hidden gems that sometimes we may not get to hear. And this is why we do the Prabhupada Memoirs series. So really, really appreciate that. We have gone over time, everybody. And there is one question though that I think would be lovely if I was to quickly just bring it up, which was, and I'll find the person asked, is that, can you recall that 2-minute conversation that Srila Prabhupada said when he was asked that to give a 2-minute?
Well, briefly, he said, of course, he said Hare Krishna. He said, we're the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In this age of Kali, the recommended process for self-realization is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And the whole purpose of this human form of life is to serve Krishna and always remember Krishna. Basically, that's it.
Wow. So there you go. So that Radha Sham asked that question. So there you go. You've got your answer. And I just want to say thank you so much, Dhananjaya Prabhu. It's been an honor to speak to you. And with your permission, hopefully this won't be the only time and we can do, because this is just one little fraction of conversation. There's so many pastimes you've had, and I think it wouldn't do justice to go through it in one session in an hour. We need to break it up and get you again. So please, with your blessings and permission, I hope we can contact you again and get you on. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your time, and to your good wife as well for helping us to set this up. And I just want to say to everybody, please do. There's one thing that I've been getting that's coming through from one devotee. They said that these memories should be somehow recorded into a book. Dhananjaya Prabhu, I'm hearing that coming. So we're hoping that at some point soon you will have this book. And you that's a request from some of the people I can see here in our chat box. So please do, so we can relish these memories over and over again as well through a book. So that's just a request.
If it wants it to happen, it will certainly happen.
Yes, I hope so. And thank you everybody for joining, and please do stay tuned. Like we say, we're doing this on a weekly basis, and so every Saturdays. And we soon will be knowing the next person that will be joining us. But so far, it's been such a great journey. Learned so much inside information that otherwise we would not have had the chance to learn. So thank you, Dhananjaya Prabhu. I pray we speak soon. And no, thank you. And everybody else, take care. Until next time, all we'll say is Hare Krishna.